Well, this morning I'm heading up towards the old Tucson movie studio set there and up towards Saguaro National Park. I probably won't be doing the park because I got to head to El Paso here after the old town there. So looks to be a partly cloudy day. There goes a rabbit. He was taking his life in his hands. I like how these people down here, they don't have yards with grass. They have all the natural plants with lots of cactus. That's kind of cool. Probably don't even have to water. There's a guy with baby grass. It's all dried up. On the way up to old Tucson here, you can lots of pullouts where you can see all different kinds of cactus here. It's kind of a protected area. See the hills up in there are just covered with them. Might walk down this path a little bit here. Quite the beautiful area here. If I was a little younger with younger legs, I would take a hike up to the top of that mountain there. That'd be kind of cool. Get some good views of Tucson, I bet you. Now look at this cactus here. He's got all kinds of holes drilled into him. I don't know. I think there's some kind of bird that nests in those. He's a pretty big one. The Don't Touch Me cactus. Whew. They got all kinds of spines on that little guy. I call these the hands up, don't shoot cactus. They got the arms, two little arms, big cactus. Yeah, these are the ones that, I guess they're Ocho cactus, something like that, but they limb out here and then they drop those little balls you see on the ground down there. And then the animal comes around and it clings to them and they could be transported for many miles and get replanted somewhere. And the animal gets, there's just little babies down there. But those are really sharp as any needle you would have. That mountain up there just prickled with thousands of saguaro cactuses. Pretty cool. Back on the road. Well, it's a little windy here in Arizona, Tucson, with the old Tucson movie set here. Here's this camera crane. It's an old one. Got like a fake camera on top. But it's a real camera crane here. Or boom. Here's the old controls for it. Brake, tilt, cue light, balance. The steering wheel, I guess you sat down here. One guy steered and another guy up there on the boom. Well, we'll go into the gift shop and where you get the tickets and sign up for the tours here. Ooh-wee. Hello. Well, we'll take a little tour in here at the gift shop. Kind of Southwest stuff. My wife was here. She'd be at least half an hour in here, I think. All kinds of cute doodads. But that's not what I'm here for. Yeah, look at all these toy guns. Wow, what a collection of toy guns. They have Roy Rogers models and all kinds of stuff. They're Jesse James model there. Wow. You can get handcuffs. Of course, the t-shirts. Oh, Tucson t-shirts. Yeah, they're pretty cool. Don't know if I need another t-shirt though, but it's so windy and cool out there. This sweatshirt might be good. You can become a performer out here. Get some auditions for musical people and stunt performers. You want to get thrown like that? Or shoot a gun. There's their map of all the activities, mercantiles, and attractions, all that kind of thing. Cool. The walking tour. Oh yeah. I got mine on my phone here.
Go ahead.
We'll just gather on the little patio right over here.
Outside. Okay. Waiting for the tour guide. It's windy, but not crazy cold, but probably in the 40s though. Should have wore another layer. Our tour guide.
Welcome to Tucson. My name is Jacob. I'll be showing you around the property today. How many of you are visiting with us for the very first time? My jokes will be mostly fresh then. Before we head out, just a couple friendly reminders for being on the property and what is basically our off hours. While we're known mostly these days as a theme park destination, we are still a working film and television production site. We have a little bit of work going on to some of our sets today, so we might occasionally have one or more of our service vehicles out on the streets with us. So we just need to keep the group together at all times, and that way no one ends up auditioning as a speed bump. Ask any questions that come to mind. I'll do my best to answer those questions. If I don't know the answer, I will check my little cheat sheet right here. And if that little guy lets me down, as it will from time to time, yeah, technology letting us down from time to time. I will be happy to write your question down, dive into our archive, and email that information on out to you, because I'm one of those kinds of tour guides. Okay. That sounds a lot better than the truth. I'm just a research nerd, and any excuse I can get to get into our archive, I will gladly take it. So at this point, we're going to head on over here to Front Street and get this show on the road. It was a really big year for Hollywood. You had two major film projects that were just racing each other to the finishing line. Now, there were a whole bunch of other films that come out in 1939, but Hollywood was obsessed with these two in particular just to see which one was going to win that grudge match and beat the other one to the theaters. And the winner of that race turned out to be The Wizard of Oz. It arrived in theaters in August of 1939. Right on the heels of that was its main competitor, Gone with the Wind. Now, while all that excitement was going on and Hollywood was kind of focused on these two films, there was another studio out there called Columbia. Columbia Pictures, which is kind of a big name these days, was still kind of building itself up in 1939. They got their start back in 1918 as CBC Studios. And up until the 1920s, they were doing mostly what were just low-budget, light entertainment films, or what today would be thought of as a B-movie. They made their first feature film in 1924, so they had a couple under their belt, and in 1939, they decided it was time to show Hollywood that they were going to be able to eventually compete with things like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. To do that, they were going to attempt something that Hollywood was not known for, and that was historical accuracy. If you were to put an audience in a theater, dress someone a certain way, and play a certain type of music in the background, the audience will go, oh, it's a Western. But for the movie they were going to shoot here, they pulled out all the stops. It was called Arizona. And it was based on a very popular Western romance novel that had been published in 1938 under the same title. And it was talking about the Arizona Territory in the 1860s, right at the beginning of the Civil War, when this territory was deciding whether or not it wanted to remain with the Union or become part of the Confederate States of America. Well, the author took the character of Phoebe and kind of stuck her in real-life events. So they wanted to keep that you were there feel of the book in the movie. That meant that they were going to have to film in the proper locations with the right kind of costumes, firearms, set pieces, everything had to match the time period of that film. That meant they could not film that movie in Hollywood's go-to location to represent Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas at that time. That was the north end of Death Valley, California, not too far from a mining camp called Cerro Gordo. That story takes place in Pima County. That's where they're going to film it. That brought them out to this part of the county in January of 1939. They were showed around by a local businessman by the name of Nicholas Hall. And what they ended up with is the 300-acre lot you folks are visiting today. Before the ink had even had a chance to dry on the lease with Pima County, Columbia descended on this spot with a budget of $2,300,000 for the entire movie. And with $500,000 of that, they built a full-scale replica of Tucson, Arizona as it existed in 1862 when that story takes place. That was 87 full-scale adobe structures. And that was something Hollywood was also not known for. Full-scale for Hollywood at that time was 7/8 full size. So think Main Street USA Disneyland. Those are 7/8 scale buildings. Hollywood preferred that size because they were a little less expensive, especially if you had large-scale sets to build, and it had the added benefit of making your leading men look taller. But for this film, they're going for 1-to-1 scale, so if you're a little on the short side, too bad. You're going to look short on the big screen, too. Now, Phoebe's right here. This is one of 9 structures on the property built for the movie Arizona that is still in use today. This will give you an idea of the overall size and the level of detail that went into them. Even if you never got close enough to see things like the window trim, if it existed on a building in 1862 and they could prove it, they copied it right here in 1939. By the time this set was done, the locals began referring to it by the only nickname it would ever go by, Old Tucson. Filming on the movie began on April 2nd, 1939, was completed 4.5 months later, July 27th.
Wow, thanks.
At that point, they had everything they needed. They packed up, they went back to Los Angeles to edit the film, put the score into it, and get it ready for release. And what they left in their wake was a $500,000 ghost town they had no intention of ever returning to. For all the time and effort they put into these buildings, this was a one-and-done property as far as they were concerned. And since everything was made out of mud brick at that point, they figured that within 20, maybe 30 years, the seasonal rains that come through here in the summer months would melt this set right back into the dirt that it had been made out of. But we're here today, so that's not how that story ended. 1947 rolls around, Hollywood returned to the desert one more time. They'd heard about this place through the rumor mill, and they were intrigued. They wanted to see if it had any potential. Well, they just so happened to bring an up-and-coming cowboy actor out here by the name of Gene Autry. And he had a lot of friends in the business. He had a blast filming out here. He went back and told all of them about it, and the next thing Pima County knows, Hollywood executives are knocking on Pima County's door about 1 to 5 times a year requesting permission to lease this property from them to shoot a Western. It became such a regular occurrence that by 1960, this lot had officially been redesignated as a movie studio. As of today, this one-and-done property from 1939 has appeared in over 500 titles and counting. And the two most recent feature films to call us home were both shot here in 2023. The first is called Among Wolves. That's out on Amazon right now. It stars Tom Berenger and Trace Atkins. And with the exception of the establishing shot, that entire movie was filmed right here at Old Tucson. The second was filmed here in part in the summer of 2023. That's called Long Shadows. It was recently out in theaters. AMC picked it up. It's getting ready to come out on streaming services at this point. And anytime they are in town in that movie, they're right here at Old Tucson. Now, if you've seen the movie Young Guns 2 with Emilio Estevez that was shot here in part in 1990, you will have seen exactly where we're standing at the 40-minute mark in that movie. We are now representing Fort Sumner, New Mexico in that film. It was the town that was harboring Billy and his gang in the early 1880s. And they were making use of everything from our ticket booths all the way down to the schoolhouse set, mostly filming along this side of the street with the buildings that passed Olson on both sides coming into play, with the exception of the green one. That wasn't built until 2000. We've been a theme park for almost 30 years when they shot that movie, so the set dressers had to come through and reverse engineer every single one of the buildings they wanted to use out of its theme park look and back into a more historical style. That meant all the signs had to come down: drinking fountains, trash cans, benches, handrails, door locks, doorknobs. The list of things that had to be removed went on for days. Once that was taken care of, the set dressers then came through, redressed everything, and the street was ready to be filmed. Now, to their credit, they did a fantastic job of it. When you look at the street scene in that movie, you'd swear this set was built specifically for that film, and not a collection of buildings that have been serving Hollywood since 1939. But because of this thing called YouTube, they are never given credit where credit is due, because the set dressers forgot to remove 2 things from Phoebe's. Both of them wound up in the finished shot. YouTube loves to harp on these things.
Oh, yeah.
So guess what we're going to do? We're going to talk about them too. We have a screenshot right over here that shows how both of those would appear in the movie. You're right this way, folks.
Some people
So here we
examine
have the
every
hour of
frame.
Billy Westevez as Billy the Kid, bringing his herd of cattle right down the road here. You have no idea how thrilled our facilities maintenance crews were to have that number of bovine on these streets day in and day out for about a week. But right here behind him, here's Phoebe's all stripped down and ready to go. And once you know where to look, your eye will go straight to these every single time you watch this scene. I know mine certainly do, no matter how hard I try not to. It starts with 2 electrical conduits, one up here and one running right up the side of the building.
Okay.
Now, because those are structural elements, they cannot be taken down. So what they normally would do is allow them to hide in plain sight by covering them with wood cladding and making them look like downspouts. It's a very similar treatment that we give to our swamp cooler housings. They end up being chimneys. Well, they forgot to do that this time around. Now, this would no longer be a problem to modern Hollywood for two reasons. These conduits now reside on the backside when this section of the park was rewired. But even if they were still in those positions, you could easily go in and digitally remove them today.
Sure.
They are in place to provide power and signal to the Dolby speaker they forgot to take off the roof line. Now that one is a little harder to explain, but it has since turned into a long-running joke here on the property, and it goes like this. What you're seeing here is not a set dressing error. It is photographic proof of a very forward-thinking shop clerk. And he was kind enough to provide his customers with Dolby surround sound for their shopping experience 110 years before his competition could beat him to it.
Very good.
Determinant is to look in the background of any of their scenes, especially establishing shots, and look for that mountain right there. It's called Golden Gate Peak. And because of its size and its relation to just about every single filming angle on the sets, that mountain has been photobombing Hollywood westerns here since 1939. Cinematographers and directors loved it. They would use it as an establishing shot a lot of the time. If you pan off to the left, you get the town coming into view. You pan off to the right, and the desert's in view. Either way, it's going to give your audience a feeling of vastness and isolation simultaneously. But there was one production company that went out of its way to hide where it was filming. Most of the time, we portray California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. That's what we do best out here. But starting in 1977, a pretty tall order came across our production desk. I'm fairly certain that the phrase, "You have got to be kidding me," was on the lips of just about every single member of the staff at that time, because we were being asked to portray, I kid you not, the state of, dramatic pause, Minnesota. Now, other than being 1/50th of the U.S., that's all we have in common with Minnesota, unless you are talking about Michael Landon.
Yeah.
Anyone grew up watching Little House on the Prairie?
Oh,
you are
yeah.
now standing in Mankato, Minnesota for that television series.
That's
Now, of all the places they could have chosen to portray Minnesota, they chose the Sonoran Desert specifically because Michael Landon had already been out here several years earlier for the television show Bonanza. They filmed 3 episodes here. They were all set in Texas. So they were using the adobes around the old Mission and Presidio sets that we had at that time. He became very familiar with old Tucson as a whole, but specifically a section on the north end of the lot called Kansas Street. That ends up as Mankato, Minnesota, because he ends up as one of the producers for Little House. Now, to hide where they're filming all of the Minnesota scenes, they got really creative. For one thing, their cameras always point that way, so you have the flat blue skyline behind everything, and you don't have to explain to the audience why great big mountains have suddenly popped up in Minnesota in the 1860s. The other thing they would do is they would get very close to the buildings on Kansas Street. That would shield the mesquite trees, the Palo Verde, and the Saguaro from view. That worked 9 times out of 10, no problem. Then you get to 10 out of 10. Cross streets and alleyways. That is where the desert will show through no matter what angle you film from. Well, to deal with that problem, they had 2 options. Option 1, if your cast is walking down a boardwalk and you're coming up to a gap like this, guess where your commercial break's going to go? You fade to black before you get there. You come back from commercial, they've either crossed the street or they've arrived at their destination and it's no longer a problem. That only worked if that scene could be split into 2 pieces. Most of their shots did not time out that way. So they relied heavily on option number 2. They had enormous planter boxes with trees and shrubs and bushes of varying sizes, depending on what they were trying to hide from the camera. In the case of an alley like this, they brought them all out. They would pile them up at the back, then hide those planter boxes by placing crates, barrels, wagons, extras, whatever it took right in front of them. They would then shoot past that thing as fast as they could and hope nobody was looking too closely at what was actually going on back there. So the next time you watch Little House on the Prairie and they're in Mankato and you see a forest in an alleyway for no apparent reason with a whole bunch of people standing around just kind of going, hi. That's a production company desperately trying to hide the Sonoran Desert on the backside of that scene. Now there was one shot they did for the television series here that no matter what they did, they could not hide the Tucson mountains, and that was the episode where they go to the county fair and the girls go up in a hot air balloon and the tether breaks. Well, as that balloon is lifting off, you will see the Tucson mountains in the background. It was unavoidable. You will also see the shadow of the helicopter filming that scene on the ground. So apparently they had helicopters and Dolby surround sound back in the Old West. This was a very progressive town.
Yeah.
As we work our way a little bit farther into the sets, take a look at these buildings all around you, because just like your tour guide today, every single one of them is an actor in its own right. Now, just because that says a photography studio or a schoolhouse or a hotel, that's the role they're playing right now. But just like any other actor in the business, you give them a different role to play, they get a different costume to wear. These buildings' interiors and exteriors can be redone to become anything that the director requires them to be to tell a story here. And we have one building up ahead. It fell to typecasting back in 1939. That's our blacksmith shop. It was built as one for the movie Arizona, and that's the only thing it's ever done. But it has two rather noteworthy appearances in films. To talk about those, we're going to pay a visit to the blacksmith.
Up on the boardwalk you go.
Now, the first story that I have for you today, it's 1957. Burt Lancaster's paying us a visit. He's here in the role of Wyatt Earp, and they're here to do the last sequence for Gunfight at the OK Corral. This is the first of two retellings of that epic gunfight that will call old Tucson home. The one we're better known for is the movie Tombstone. It'll be shot here in part in 1992. As a historian, I love the 1957 version, not because it's a historical masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. To be perfectly honest, that film, on a scale of 1 to 10, in historical accuracy, it gets a -2. They get the names and dates right. Beyond that, it is a popcorn western, hands down. But it has all four of my favorite Hollywood golden era western movie tropes that just line up like ducks in a row during the actual gunfight scene. Starting with trope number 1. That's Hollywood taking a little piece of history and milking it for every single thing they can get out of it. The actual gunfight this movie is talking about took place about 60 miles from here in Tombstone, Arizona, on October 26, 1881, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By most accounts of that gunfight, given by Wyatt Virgil, Morgan Earp, Doc Holliday, Sheriff Johnny Behan, Ike Clanton, and any other member of the community that witnessed it, they all testified later on in court that that gun battle lasted about 30 seconds, and that was it. Unless it's 1957 and your name is Burt Lancaster and you are playing Wyatt Earp, your gunfight goes on for 10 minutes. The reason it goes on that long? Well, that's trope number 2 showing up the minute the bullets start to fly, and that is small number of good guys taking on a ridiculously large number of bad guys. Trope 3 shows up and introduces the blacksmith shop and historians to the story, and that is wrong person, wrong place, wrong time. Toward the end of that ridiculously drawn-out gunfight, you will see Doc Holliday, played by Kirk Douglas, come up behind the blacksmith shop, which in that movie, this is serving as the entrance to the OK Corral. He comes up behind the blacksmith shop's wall, looks through that window, and standing right about here, with his back continually pointing at that window, is his nemesis, Johnny Ringo. So Doc fires 2 shots at Ringo. He drops dead right here on the boardwalk. The audience goes, yes! And historians go, what? Up to that point, historians have been watching this entire movie like this because of all the historical inaccuracies present in this retelling of the events of October 1881. But to see Doc Holliday kill Johnny Ringo by shooting him twice in the back on the porch of a blacksmith shop during the gunfight, no. Our inner history nerds will no longer handle this kind of abuse, and you will start to hear the nerd voice cry out in protest from the back of the theater. It sounds a bit like, excuse me, Mr. Director, sir, hi. If I could have a moment of your time, please, sir, there are a couple of discrepancies I'd like to point out. Johnny Ringo was not present at the gunfight at the OK Corral. In fact, he was nowhere near town that day. He didn't hear about the gunfight for 2, maybe 3 days after the fact. He's not even in the territory when it happens. He's actually over in California visiting with his sisters. He also doesn't come rushing back to avenge anyone or anything for any reason. He takes his time about it. He's not back in Tombstone again until February of 1882. We know by the local newspapers he was in town
by at least the 2nd of February that year because he got into an argument with Wyatt Earp, but nothing really came of it. And he doesn't shed off his mortal coil, to quote Shakespeare, until July 13th, 1882. And he's not even in town when it happens. All we do know is that they heard one single gunshot on July 13th. They went out to investigate it later on and found him the following morning with a single gunshot wound to his right temple, both of his boots missing. He was propped up in the trunk of a tree. And it looks like someone tried to scalp him. We have no idea what's going on with that, but I just thought I'd throw that in for fun.
That's pretty good.
Now, at that point,
Good job.
producers and directors will look at historians and quote Captain Jack Sparrow. Oh, shut it. We have now arrived to my favorite, trope number 4, which if you are a reenactor or a historian, and I fall into both categories, we have a love-hate relationship with this one, and we have come to refer to it as the bottomless 6-shooter. The next time you watch Gunfight at the OK Corral, start counting.
Yeah.
They are all carrying the exact same model of 6-shot revolvers in that gunfight scene. And by the time that 10-minute wonder is over, they have fired them 103 times, and the total number of reloads, 0. And again, you'll hear the history nerds going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is called a 6-shooter for a reason. It goes bang 6 times. If you try to go past that, what you should hear is, and that's it. But not in a movie of this time period. Oh, no. They'll shoot this way. They'll shoot that way. They will fan 500 bad guys off the roof like ducks in a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
On top of that, they will do tucks and rolls and spin tricks to the point that you're waiting for them to start singing the Macarena. But at no point will you ever see them stop to reload, not unless the story calls for it. And that's because what they're carrying into battle with them is the 1873 Cattleman revolver. Was based off of the Army version, which is very, very popular in the Old West. They were durable, they were reliable, and right up at the top of the list, you could pick one up for about $20 at that time. That's a little less than 1 month's wage, so it was easily something you could save up for. Because of their durability, because all these things predated planned obsolescence, a lot of them wound up in pawn shops by the 1930s because of the Great Depression. In response to the rise in popularity of Westerns, Hollywood goes on a shopping spree, buys up as many of these as they can get their hands on at basically scrap value, and the Model 73 becomes the go-to firearm for Westerns then and now. Now, as modern as it looks from the outside, when it comes to reloading, it has a lot more in common with its predecessor, the percussion revolvers. There's a lot of steps you have to go through to eject your 6 spent cartridges, put 6 more in, cycle through everything, and get the gun ready to go again. It's going to take you about 2, maybe 2.5 minutes, assuming your hands aren't shaking the whole time because people are actually shooting at you. That's an eternity in a gunfight scene. So Hollywood has just been editing around all of that and leaving the audience under the assumption that somewhere in there they've gone through all the rigmarole necessary to reload the cylinder and keep that gunfight going. Now, to its credit, Hollywood did eventually admit that it does not know how to count to 6. It took them a while, but they finally got around to it. It was 1979,
Wow.
and the film was shot right here. It's called The Villain.
Oh.
Now, if you've never seen that movie, the best way to describe The Villain, it was Hollywood making fun of itself and having the time of its life doing it. They took every single Western movie cliche, put it in one film on purpose, and challenged the audience to spot every single one of them. So here's a couple of examples. The bad guy wears black the whole time. The good guy wears white. The bad guy's plans are so over the top that every time he tries one, it fails spectacularly, and his name might as well be Wile E. Coyote. On the other side of things, the hero is tall, handsome, strapping, as dumb as the dirt we're all walking around on. Even his name was a cliche. He was named for the trope he represents in the movie. So for the entire film, every character, including the hero, will refer to him as Handsome Stranger. Now, the role of Handsome Stranger was being played by a relatively unknown actor to Hollywood at that time, but everybody walked out of the theaters talking about him because no one had the slightest idea how to say the guy's name. When it came up in the opening credits, it went from one side of the screen to the other. And that might sound a little strange today, but back in 1979, there weren't that many people on this side of the Atlantic that could pronounce the Austrian surname Schwarzenegger.
Oh, good thing.
If you knew how to pronounce Arnold Schwarzenegger at that point, you'd been keeping up with the Mr. Olympia or Mr. Universe competitions. That is what he was known for. It wouldn't be until the early 80s into the 90s that Arnold really starts to become a household name. But he has one of the best one-liners in the first part of the movie when Hollywood really starts digging into itself. When he turns to the damsel in distress, played by Anne Margaret, and says, "Not to worry, I have a 7-shot 6-shooter." 6-shooter. It took them 79 years, but they finally got around to confessing that they don't know how to count to 6. And as the old saying goes, better late than never. Do we have any John Wayne fans on the tour today?
Oh yeah.
Well, if you're starting to get a little feeling of deja vu looking around this side of the property, this is not your imagination playing tricks on you. We are standing on a section of the lot collectively referred to as Stage 2. John Wayne paid us 4 visits between 1958 and 1969, and that was for Rio Bravo, Rio Lobo, El Dorado, and my personal favorite of the group, McLintock. We still have quite a few bits and pieces left over in recognizable condition, especially going all the way back to his first visit with us in 1958's Rio Bravo. It starts with the little wooden footbridge right here. You will see that bridge at the very beginning of the movie. There's a funeral coming out of town. And there's a little boy banging on the drums, setting the cadence for the miners right here, and then they go down the road here. But most of the time, the camera, which would be sitting right about where the Stage 2 sign is, it's looking this way down Front Street. And there is a long row of very annoyed freight wagons stopped here. They want to get their cargo of dynamite out of the sun before it gets to the point where it gets overheated and goes kaboom on them. Because dynamite in the Old West was many things, but reliable was not one of them. Well, eventually they get the okay to go into town. They take the wagons on through, and we're now introduced to John Wayne's character. He's the sheriff in town. Now, he's already in the middle of a conversation, and they're talking about some of the problems that Nathan Burdett and his gang have been causing to the community here. And that's when the wagon captain, who has also had a run-in with Burdett, joins that conversation. At that point, the sheriff learns what his cargo is, and he plans to spend the night at the livery stable, let that dynamite cool down, and then make his deliveries in the morning. Well, the sheriff's not thrilled with that plan any more than he is thrilled with Nathan Burdett, so he comes up with this rather sarcastic solution to both of their problems, and he tells the wagon captain, well, if you want to, you can put that wagon out across the creek over by Burdett's warehouse. If it blows up there, I can't think of a better place for it to happen.
Okay.
Well, as it turns out, that is exactly where that wagon of dynamite ends up being set out, and it becomes a very useful thing to the sheriff later on in the movie. Now, the next scene you'll see them film on Stage 2 with buildings we still have, that makes use of our blacksmith shop. Now, you see it very briefly at the beginning of the movie. They come back here later on because this is sort of the entrance to that town in the movie. And you will see Dean Martin's character, Dude, who has, for who knows how many times in that movie, given up drinking. And as a result of that, he is now nursing a terrible hangover. Yeah, Dean Martin with a terrible hangover. Oh, imagine my surprise. You want to talk about a method actor? That's our boy Dean. But at one point, he comes up to the edge of the boardwalk, kneels down in front of a watering trough they had set out over here, and he splashes some water on his face to take his mind off of his headache. And at that point, he gets ambushed by a couple members of the Burdett gang. They dunk him into the water, pull him to his feet, knock him out, and rather unceremoniously dump him right here in the middle of the floor of the blacksmith shop. The next time you see them filming over here, it's at close to the end of the movie. And it's the run-up to and including the gunfight scene this movie is known for. Now that all begins at the sheriff's office, which sadly we no longer have that building on the property. I'll be explaining why in a little bit. But it would have been at the end of Front Street, on the right side, just past the dentist sign, right about where that black loading dock is today. So out the door of the sheriff's office comes John Wayne in the lead. Right behind him is his prisoner, Joe Burdett, who's being played by Claude Akins. And keeping an eye on Burdett is sidekick number 3, Deputy Colorado, who is being played by Teen Idol heartthrob in training, Ricky Nelson. All 3 of them start their long walk through town on their way to a prisoner exchange, and that will bring them past our 2-story hotel building. The 2 adobes to the left of it, they cross over the bridge from earlier in the movie. They come off the bridge, they turn to their left, walk along the side of the blacksmith shop, and they're headed to the barn over here. But when you see it for the very first time in Rio Bravo, this wooden section wasn't there yet. That was added on in 1965 for the movie El Dorado. Now this barn was one of 27 sets that would go up for the 4 movies that John Wayne shot here. But it's the only one you're going to see in all 4 movies because John Wayne fell in love with this thing. He thought it was just a wonderful piece of Old West design. And so if he ever came back after Rio Bravo, he would make arrangements to have a scene filmed using this structure, either as a main location or just in the background showing some screen time. So as a main filming location, you will see it in Rio Bravo, Rio Lobo, and El Dorado. And then in McLintock, this is the barn that Mrs. McLintock runs into right before her dress goes missing. Now the side that got the most amount of screen time is also pretty much intact. And hadn't been a whole lot done to it over the years. When we come around the corner, a lot of our John Wayne fans kind of go, I have arrived.
Okay, let's arrive.
Now when you're looking at this in Rio Bravo, this awning wasn't there yet. That was added onto the structure for Rio Lobo. But John Wayne comes out the door here with Claude Akins. They're standing right here in front of the barn. Ricky Nelson has opened that set of shutters. He's getting his Winchester ready to go. And the sheriff tells Burdette, you stay put. He comes out to about here. And he hollers over to a warehouse building that would have been sitting right in the middle of what is now the Arizona Theater building. He's trying to get the attention of Nathan Burdette, the main bad guy. Burdette comes out the side door. They discuss the terms and conditions of the prisoner exchange they're here to do, and it begins. If anything can go wrong, it will. Why? Because this is 1958. You're filming a Western. They are looking for an excuse for a gunfight scene to kick off, and they've just established everything you need for that to happen. And sure enough, the lead starts to fly. The ridiculous number of bad guys over here open fire on the very outnumbered good guys in the barn. And just when everybody in the audience is convinced that the deputy and the sheriff over here have seen their last sunrise as law dogs in this town, another Hollywood action trope kicks in, and that is character that everybody likes but has not been seen in a while suddenly shows up from out of nowhere with no explanation given as to how they came to be there, and they end up rescuing everybody else. In this case, it is sidekick number 1, played by veteran Hollywood character actor Walter Brennan.
Oh,
That's
he was
Deputy
good.
Stumpy. Now, Stumpy has been watching the whole thing from behind a chest-high adobe wall that used to run right along this section of the property. It was actually put up for the movie Arizona. And it would have been, he would have been standing right over that cluster of brushes just behind that really big tree there. Well, he also just so happens to have brought with him his double-barrel shotgun, which he is now using to blow large holes in the ridiculous number of bad guys trying to surround his boss. He also just so happens to be standing right next to the wagon with the dynamite in it from earlier in the movie. Once that's brought to his attention, it gives him an idea. He grabs a case of dynamite, hobbles over and joins the sheriff, who by now has run out the side door of the barn, across this little wash, through a hole in the wall, and he has run down to take up a position with Stumpy over here. Once those two get back together, we are now treated to the most brilliantly executed old married couple conversation you are ever going to hear between a sheriff and the deputy that works for him until the Andy Griffith Show premieres in 1960. Now that whole thing goes on for a little over 12 minutes, so this is the Reader's Digest version, but it keeps the spirit of that whole thing going quite well. The sheriff just looks over and says, "So you think you can throw? You're pretty near better than you can shoot, I wager." Stumpy takes the first stick of dynamite, rears back, he lets fly with it. The sheriff takes a shot with his rifle. It blows up in the middle of the street halfway between the wall and the warehouse, does absolutely nothing. "I thought you said you could throw." "Here you go again. Ain't nothing good enough for you. What'd you be doing right now if I weren't here to throw them for you?" "I'd be throwing them myself." You got a point there. So he takes another stick of dynamite, rears back, he lets fly with it. This time they manage to blow a corner of the porch off. "Can you throw any farther?" The gloves come off. If Rio Bravo had been made today, that's when Walter Brennan probably would have said, "Hold my beer." He takes 3 sticks of dynamite, grabs a hanky out of his back pocket, ties the whole thing together, and launches it like a Hail Mary pass at the end of a really important football game. It lands dead center on the porch. The sheriff takes a shot, and the next thing you know, the whole front of the building is gone, obliterated from the map of town by the explosion. The bad guys inside have decided they don't want to be bad guys anymore. They all come out the side door throwing their guns on the ground, and the audience is left going, "Hooray for our side." Now, when you have an explosion like that in the middle of a highly choreographed gunfight scene, does Murphy's Law ever show up?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And in this case, it had VIP tickets. That warehouse was built with an untested special effect as part of its framework. Now, in theory, and I love it as a historian, the phrase "in theory" always leads to a really nice story. In theory, it was sound enough. The building was designed to come apart. The explosive charges were designed to kick the bolts holding the thing together out of position, and it would just sort of fold in like a house of cards and collapse, and it, you know, go from being a structure to being flattened like a pancake on one end. But the problem that the pyrotechnic crew pointed out to the director is things blow up, they don't blow down. So what they came up with was the idea of wrapping neutral colored paper, so basically earth tones, around the explosive charges. The idea being that when those explosives go off, the paper gets shredded, it flies out in all directions as the structure starts to give way, and it looks like shrapnel going everywhere as the building is being torn to pieces. Great! Did they test that theory first? Nope, they just said, it should work, we should be good. When that explosion went off, they discovered that, yes, it worked in theory. The bolts were kicked out, the building comes apart, the paper did in fact get shredded to the consistency of the sand we're walking around on. It turned into a confetti bomb, and it just flew up in the air and kind of hung there for 2 or 3 minutes as it slowly settled to the ground.
Wow.
In less than 1 second, Howard Hawks had gone from filming an action-packed Western adventure scene to an average Tuesday at Mardi Gras. Because of that little oversight, the shot was ruined. For the next 7 days, they had to shoot around that scene to maintain schedule, clean that mess up, rebuild the entire front end of a structure they only planned to blow up once, this time without colored paper, and to ensure that every viewing angle of the warehouse in that shot looked exactly the same from beginning to end. The entire gunfight scene was scrapped and refilmed.
Wow.
So to use a highly technical term from Hollywood for a situation like that, oops.
Take two. Yep.
Yeah, take two and keep your fingers crossed. Here we go. Now, the next time you'll see this is a major filming location. It's Rio Lobo. This time, John Wayne is not defending the barn. He's actually attacking it. So the bad guys are over here. And Jack Elam and John Wayne, they're over where the warehouse used to be. Now it is a cantina building. And you kind of get that old married couple conversation going on again between Jack Elam's character and John Wayne's when he looks over and realizes that he has a Winchester and Jack Elam has a scattergun. And he just says, "That won't do any good at this range." Yeah, I know. It just makes me feel like I'm getting something done. And he just keeps slamming away with the shotgun. As cameo appearances go, this side of John Wayne's barn shows up in 2 films in cameos. In El Dorado, you will see it right after he goes to talk to Ed Asner's character, and he doesn't trust him. He won't turn his back. So when he backs his horse away, look over his shoulder. There's the barn behind him. And then when he turns his horse to finally ride back into town, he comes right down the road here, and you get another little quick shot of him passing alongside of his barn. And then for McLintock fans, yes, this is the barn that Mrs. McLintock runs into right before her dress goes missing, leaving her in nothing but her bloomers for the rest of the movie. And if you're here during the summer and wonder why we sell bloomers in the gift shop, that is a nod to the movie McLintock. Now, for its final appearance as a main filming set, you get to see the side of the building that really only ever did cameo appearances up until El Dorado, and that's technically the rear of the structure. Of Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. If Taming of the Shrew took place in 1887, it's the movie McLintock. Now, by the 1965, this wooden section has been added on to John Wayne's favorite barn. We have now arrived at the main scene it's going to be used for. It's also in the movie El Dorado, and you are looking at Swede Larson's gunsmith shop for that film. Now, very early on in that movie, we're introduced to his sidekick. Goes by the nickname of Mississippi. And you might be detecting a bit of a pattern here. Well, in one movie, he had a sidekick goes by the nickname Colorado. Now it's Mississippi. That's because it's the same screenwriter. And he was just sort of recycling that particular idea. The joke here being that he had 48 other movies he could do before he ran out of sidekicks. Well, in this case, Mississippi is being played by a very young James Caan, and the movie El Dorado is his first film. From here, he would go on to do the Godfather series, and that's really considered the springboard of his acting career. But he is established very early on in that movie as a knife thrower. In the scene that involves this structure, he has just one scene before demonstrated to John Wayne that he can't shoot to save his life. He is so inexperienced with firearms that when he tries out a revolver for the first time, he might as well be holding it like this. He has no idea what he's doing. So John Wayne hatches a plan. He's going to bring him to Mr. Larson's gunsmith shop here and get him squared away with a firearm that is best suited for people who don't know how to shoot. What he walks out that door with at the end of that scene is a sawed-off, double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun. Back in the Old West, thanks to Marshall Earp, the nickname that they had used kind of had taken off in popularity, and shotguns were collectively referred to as street howitzers. What are they comparing them to? Basically cannons. Well, the next scene after this structure's in use, they kind of wrap the joke up they've been setting for the last two scenes. Mississippi fires that shotgun for the very first time, and he's still inexperienced. It almost knocks him over, but he's kind of like, I like it. Okay? Well, that wasn't too far from the truth. At that point in his career, James Caan weighed about 100 pounds wringing wet. And the director was a little concerned that the script called for both barrels to be fired simultaneously. Even with blanks in them, a barrel only that long is going to kick like a mule. And they were concerned that both the shotgun and the actor were going to get launched right out of the frame. So what he had James Caan do was, all right, pull both of the hammers back, get into position on your mark, pull the triggers, fake the recoil, stagger back a little bit, and call it good. It carried the joke. The muzzle flash was put in by the animation department of Warner Brothers Studios. Now, they were able to get away with that little substitution for two reasons. For one thing, it goes by very quickly. But what really allowed them to get away with it was that the projectors in use when the film was released in 1966 were nowhere near the resolution that they are today. The audience had no idea that the substitution had taken place. They also had no reason to question it because every other time he fires that shotgun in the rest of the film, he's either braced against something or he's lying down and they're actually using blanks. So you never had a reason to question what you saw before. But if you watch that scene on a modern 4 or 5K resolution television, that shotgun might as well have a small flag pop out with the word bang written on it. It is painfully obvious this is not a real muzzle flash at all. Now, getting back to landmarks to keep an eye out for, not only do we have Golden Gate Peak over here, but our little footbridge is another one to watch for. This was one of 3 built for the movie Arizona to cross this little fake river they'd carved out on this side of the property for that movie. This is the only one that survives of the 3. The other 2 were built over by the rest of the lot as it moved out in this direction. But this one was spared because it got typecast just like our blacksmith shop, and the only role it plays is the entrance to town. So a couple of examples. Of course, this is the one from Rio Bravo where they're coming into and out of town for the gunfight scene at the very beginning of the movie that introduces the dynamite. You'll see it in 1957's Buchanan Rides Alone with Randolph Scott. It's almost a co-star in that movie. They're either showing you this bridge, talking about it, or filming nearby. And so it's the entrance to town, but it got a little extra to do in that movie. It was also the border between the U.S. and Mexico. As indicated by a sign, it would have been on this side of the bridge with 2 arrows. One pointing that way says Mexico, and the other one pointing that way says USA. But to remind the bridge of its purpose in life, they had another sign right here in the middle of the road that said Township of Agri, Texas. You'll also see it in 1957's 310 to Yuma with Glenn Ford. We're portraying Contention, Arizona in that movie. Now, when they filmed that scene, the freight shed wasn't here yet. John Wayne's barn wouldn't go up for a whole year, so this is kind of open in that shot. But you will see Glenn Ford and company come riding through what is now the theme park elements. And they come right through here, they turn their horses, they go across the bridge, they pass a sign that says Contention, and it introduces you to the town where a lot of the action in that film is going to take place. So we're going to follow in the footsteps of a lot of Hollywood legends, cross over the bridge, head on into town, and pay a visit to every single town this 300 acres has ever portrayed.
Did they put a bunch of water in here then?
They did, yeah. For the movie Arizona, they had a 32,000-gallon holding tank over there.
Wow.
So every morning they would open up the floodgates and run the water down to give the illusion it was going somewhere, and then it went out into a catch basin over where our train station is now, and they would end up watering all the livestock down over there. So by 1960, 32 movies had come and gone through our studio gates, and they'd all left their mark on Old Tucson in the form of more and more set buildings that were being added progressively to the property. By 1960, we had a sprawling metropolis out over here. That was one of the reasons that Hollywood just kept coming back. We had different styles of architecture to choose from. We could portray different eras of the Old West, from the very beginning in the late 1840s into the 1850s with our adobes, all the way up to what's considered the end of the Old West, around McLintock or so, the late 1890s as far out as about 1914. You would have come into town across the bridge right here. To your left would have been these three adobes. There would have been a two-story brick structure right here just off the bridge that anchored another row of structures that went all the way down to that creek. The next area behind that, you have the old Mission of Presidio sets left over from the movie Arizona. And that brought you to your first cross street. This is Frame Street running side to side here. The next one over, just past the bathhouse building, that is where Kansas Street would have crossed over Front Street at that time. And if you grew up watching TV Westerns, you were probably looking at Old Tucson and just didn't realize it. If you were a TV producer between the late 50s up to 1990, and you were making a Western, and someone asked you, where are you going to film it? There are only two places you're going to go to film it. You're either going to go up to Columbia, California, where the Sierra Railway is located. You know it better as the Hooterville Cannonball. Or you're going to be right here at Old Tucson on Kansas Street. Now, the television series that we played host to, this is the very short list, was High Chaparral, Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, The Rifleman, Little House on the Prairie, the original Wild Wild West television series, the miniseries How the West Was Won was filmed here on Kansas Street in part. The soap opera One Life to Live paid us a week-long visit in 1972. Yeah, they were blatantly ripping off Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. One of their cast gets bopped on the head, wakes up in 1888, and that was all filmed down over here on Kansas Street. The last television series to make use of it was The Young Riders. It was filmed here between 1989 and 1992. When Young Riders wrapped filming here, they packed up and went back to California, and right on their heels comes the movie Tombstone. So when you watch the movie Tombstone, that is the last time you will ever see Kansas Street in anything. Its final appearance was only on local television. It was April 24th, 1995, when an arson fire destroyed it. The arsonists came into the park sometime that day. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, they had made their way to the backside of Kansas Street, lit off a fire in a rather remote corner. It was a hot, dry, windy day, and by the time we realized what was going on, the fire had been driven by that wind, and the only thing that could be done was the evacuation of the park. Did they catch the person? No, they didn't. We figure they stuck around long enough to take advantage of the pandemonium and left with the rest of the evacuees. Wow. By the time the fire burned itself out around dawn the following morning, 40% of Old Tucson had been completely destroyed. All of Kansas Street was gone. White Oak Street beyond it. It gutted the center section right here. Badly damaged this side of the Presidio and Old Mission sets left over from Arizona. It also destroyed Soundstage 1, the set dressing warehouses, and the wardrobe department. Out of the ashes of that fire rose Old Tucson as it's known today. Now these three buildings right here, they were surrounded by that inferno, but they are still with us because they were built in 1939 and dirt does not burn. If you want to make sure that something you build is as fire resistant as possible, make it out of adobe. It is 6 times more fire resistant than any other building material currently in use, and there's the proof right there. They got a little singed, but they have since been repaired, redressed, and they are fully operational sets to this day. Now, the Hotel del Toro, that is one of 2 buildings you could actually do an entire tour on. It has made appearances in films and television projects from 1939 all the way up to the last 2 features that were shot here back in 2023. It's not so much the name that our guests recognize, that was added onto the structure in 2011, but it's the color and the surface details that our guests pick up on. If you have seen the movie Three Amigos, you have seen the Hotel del Toro. So we are now in that movie, Mexico in 1916, where that film is set. The Three Amigos come riding into town on a stagecoach right across that bridge. The stagecoach pulls up in front of the hotel, they pile out, they go across the street and enter into the Cantina del Borracho that would have been over here on this side of the street. Now, whoever came up with the name really enjoyed that joke so much that they actually got a full screen close-up of the name over the door. They never did translate it for the audience, but it means Bar of the Drunk in English. The perfect name for a place that sells nothing but tequila, in my opinion. That's also a very good example of Hollywood movie magic, because if you had followed them through the door of that structure, they would have actually gone into a Western wear store that was part of the theme park. So when the three amigos walk into that door, through the wonder of editing, they're then shown in soundstage number 1. That is where the Cantina del Borracho interior was located. So right behind what is now Big Jake's restaurant, that's where the whole "My Little Buttercup" gets done. They then come back out on the street. They stand in front of the hotel one more time. They look up just in time to see the absolutely fictitious Tubman 109 biplane fly right over the top of the hotel, reintroducing one of the villains to the audience. Now, for John Wayne fans, right over here where Big Jake's restaurant stands today, before the fire of '95, that was another one of our landmark structures. It was the Golden Nugget Hotel. For John Wayne fans, it was the hotel building that was catty-corner from the sheriff's office in Rio Bravo, where Angie Dickinson will throw the potted plant through the window, knocking out the bad guy going up against John Wayne on Front Street. Now, at the time they filmed that movie, that set pretty much was in 2 places. The exterior was called a false front, and it was one of a whole bunch of false fronts that wrapped around soundstage 1 and hid it from view of the camera when you're doing street scenes. Angie Dickinson is actually inside the soundstage. That's where the hotel's interior was built. So when she breaks the window, that's on a set inside of soundstage 1. They sent a memo over to the set dressers when they were ready to do the exterior of that scene, break the corresponding window on the false front. We have no idea what happened to that memo. We know it existed, but it never got to the intended parties, because in the completed scene, she picks up the plant, she throws it through the window, breaks the glass, knocks the guy out. It cuts to John Wayne's perspective over by the sheriff's office, and there's the bad guy lying flat as a mackerel. There's the broken potted plant, and the window is intact.
Oops.
1963 rolls around, and it gets its 15 minutes of fame and then some. It becomes the McLintock Hotel building. So right about where the S in Big Jake's is today, that's where Maureen O'Hara will fall backwards off the balcony, landing in the hay wagon that starts the big chase scene that ends that film. When you think back to that scene, when she falls off the balcony, it starts with a close-up of her face when she realizes there is nothing behind me. She starts doing one of these things, and it looks like she is slowly starting to fall. What she's really doing is bending at the knees and just leaning backwards like this. They had another camera set up way down the street looking back in this direction. They cut to that camera, and you will then see an itty-bitty figure right there in the middle of the screen that looks just like her fall backwards into the hay wagon. That's how they hid the transition to a stunt double. You were then supposed to see a reaction take from John Wayne, and it would cut back to that distant angle as his stunt double comes charging out and jumps down after her. If you've seen the movie, though, that is not how that scene plays down, and that is because her stunt double was here, and his called out with stomach flu that morning.
Oh.
So when John Wayne arrived on the property, he hadn't even had a chance to get out to his trailer yet. The director met him outside and just said, your stunt double can't make it. We can't find anybody else to stand in for him. Would you feel comfortable doing this jump yourself? He agreed. He'd made falls like that before. He knew how to do it safely. And when he does it, it's a textbook move. He pushes off with his left foot. His right foot guides his weight forward. He clears the edge of the balcony, gets into a slightly seated position in midair, puts his hands up to steady himself, and down he goes. But there was still a lot going through his mind in preparation for all of that. By 1963, his lower back was giving him no end of problems. And the last thing he wanted to do was land improperly and not be able to get out of bed in the morning. So with all the plans running through his mind, they drowned out the one well-meaning voice that had been nagging at him since he left the trailer, and it was going, John, you didn't take your wristwatch off this morning, John.
Oh,
When
no.
he jumps off that balcony and his hands go up, hit the pause button. His cuffs will come down far enough that right there on his left wrist, in the Old West, when everyone's supposed to have pocket watches, there's John Wayne's favorite gold Rolex in plain view of the camera. It was visible the entire time he dropped down into that hay wagon. There was a second unit camera off to the right filming his landing, and it saw the watch too. By the time they realized that he had it on in that shot, McLintock was already in the theaters, and nothing could be done about it. Now getting back to the unpleasantness of the fire of 95, when we started rebuilding Old Tucson, we did replace Soundstage 1. It was relocated. It used to be over here behind what is now Big Jake's. Today, it is, just like its predecessor, hiding in plain sight. It's the Grand Palace Hotel. Now, all of the buildings to the left of Rose's, wrapping all the way around to the green dentist's office, those are false fronts. They're only about 4, maybe 5 feet deep at most. And their job, just like before, was to hide the very modern structure back there from view when you're shooting street scenes out here. To actually get into the soundstage, you just walk in through the front door. It's a little tunnel that goes through those false fronts and into the actual filming stage behind it. We have 2 other stages on the property. This is number 3 right here, and it also hides in plain sight as a courthouse. It can also be a theater building or whatever kind of civic structure you need it to be. And then stage 2 sits way on the back side of the property. And when you look at it from the outside, it's a rather unassuming looking wooden barn. When you walk inside, its interior is set up for the needs of film and television. And we're going to step into our very well concealed sound stage here and pull the curtain back on a couple of Hollywood's how do they do it moments. When you look at this building from the outside, it's a 2-story structure, and it remains a 2-story structure until you're standing here and you look up and you realize the upstairs is a lie. It's nothing but a false front, all the way up to the little bell tower up there. And these false fronts are there to make the building look bigger than it really is when viewed from the outside. If you need to show a scene that takes place in the upstairs, no problem. You can use a soundstage anywhere on the planet and build your interiors to represent what the upstairs is supposed to look like, as long as you remember to include that detail right there, because you've already shown it to the audience from the outside. That door and window arrangement must be seen in the upstairs, otherwise your audience is not going to believe it. And you have created what's called a continuity error, which has a very bad habit of drawing the audience out of the scene because the brain is trying to figure out what's going on, because it's expecting to see something and it doesn't. The easiest way, and especially if you are using another building to represent the upstairs of the structure, the easiest way to convince your audience that you are actually here is you get about, let's say in that case, 4 sheets of plywood. You trace out the windows and then you cut those into the plywood. When you are filming on the set that is supposed to represent the upstairs, you just have spotlights shining through that. And now the light from those windows is striking a wall or another surface. The brain sees that pattern and goes, oh, those windows and whatnot are over here out of sight of the camera on the left. We must be in the upstairs of the building. Easy, easy. And that's just one of the many ways that Hollywood has been messing with your head for a very long time. We're going to step into wing stage number 2 over here and pick up with how they will use sound and other little tricks to mess with you. If you've ever wondered what your favorite television show looks like when they're filming, and assuming it's not in front of a studio audience, it's in an environment like this. This is basically it's a small-scale soundstage, but this is how they're laid out. You have your acting floors. In this case, we have 3, one here, a little piece here. This is sometimes used as the upstairs of the structure. You don't need to show too much of it. And then we have our little general store or whatever else you need to be. It can be redressed. It's currently done up as a general store. If you have ever heard anyone in Hollywood refer to someone breaking the 4th wall, what they're talking about is this point right here. Now, this set was in operation. This would be taken down. This is just to protect the set when it's not in use. But this is where the 4th wall exists. It's the imaginary boundary that separates the world of the actor from the viewpoint of the audience. If you are doing film or television, you are not supposed to acknowledge that you're being observed. Theater, it's a little different because you're playing to the audience. But in film and television, you just have to ignore all this stuff going on in your field of vision from the crews and the effects and the directors and whatnot that's going on. Because if you lock eyes with the camera and you're not supposed to, you've broken the 4th wall. Now, if your name's Ryan Reynolds, you can do that all you want to. He's made a really good career out of it. Now for this part, this is a little sleight of hand that Hollywood uses. And I'm going to need a volunteer for this part to show how this is going to go down. Who wants to get socked? Now that is not as nasty as it sounds. This is a demonstration of how you throw a punch and make it look real even though it isn't. But it does take 2 people to do this.
I'll volunteer my friend here.
No, I gotta be the cameraman.
Alright, your name, sir? John, this is
I know,
this is John. John is my
Yay,
volunteer
John.
for this. So welcome to the old Tucson stunt team. What we're going to do, this is what Hollywood's been doing for a very long time. Theater does exactly the same thing, and Hollywood picked up a lot of tricks from theater and adapted it for film. But to make something believable, sometimes all it takes is where you are viewing this from. So to make it look like we get into a fight, I come up and right into him, right? That's what it's going to look like to the audience. This is what we're actually going to be doing. First of all, we're going to spend about 6 to 8 weeks rehearsing this. And it starts out, we literally have a script for the fight. Every single thing we do. Who does what, when, and how long. Right? And it's you throw this punch, you grab him, you do this, he does that, and you learn it in sections. Once you've learned one section, they teach you the next one, it's added on, and eventually you have the entire fight going on. We're going to do it in slow motion in the initial rehearsals. That builds up our timing, and you just start doing it a little bit faster and a little bit faster until you get up. Instead of throwing a punch like this in rehearsal, you're just boom, you just wailing on them, but not really. Now, to make it look like I am putting his lights out, it all depends on where you put the camera. So from the camera's perspective, I'm actually striking. If you were to watch from any other angle, this is what you would actually see me doing. Now, for one thing, when I go to punch somebody, and once you know about this little thing, you'll never, especially if you're watching theater, you will never not see it. When I go to throw a punch, I'm doing this first. Why? I'm gauging the distance between me and the person I'm about to try to punch. I'm also distracting the audience. Hey, look at my hand over here. Forget what this one's doing. Look over here. It's bait and switch. So once I get in position, now when I nod, I want you to start turning your head to the right, follow through with your neck, and then start turning your shoulders. So it's basically gradually spinning. Yeah, exactly like that. So the camera's going to be over here at an angle that when I go to do it, it's going to look like I'm hitting him head on. But what I'm actually doing is this. Go. Boom. I'm going past him. All right? But he turns his head the minute my hand gets this far. That's why we're doing it in slow motion. So in the end, what you get is, I don't want my water bottle to go flying everywhere, like you did last week. You get, and this too.
Gonna
Don't
get
go
active.
anywhere. What you end up getting, and the reason it's head, neck, shoulder, that's how the energy would be transferred into you. So in the end, what you get is the whole boom, and off he goes. But it goes by so quickly that you don't notice I'm going past him, and that's when the sound department kicks in. They sell the illusion. Because what they'll do is when I hit him, you'll hear that, and you will also hear somebody simultaneously hitting a sandbag with a baseball bat. And so you get that spack, boom sound that's the impact of someone being hit, and then when he hits the ground, that's just another sandbag being dropped.
Boom.
Boom! Onto sand, and there's the Hollywood standard, someone hitting the deck noise. So yeah, it kind of takes the fun out of fight scenes, doesn't it? Oh yeah, they've only been working on that fight for about 8 weeks. Yeah. Now the other thing about sound effects, and one of the things I love about Hollywood is when Hollywood finds a sound effect they like, they tend to hold on to it. And one very good example is this little guy. Now the story behind it. It was originally for the movie War of the Worlds, came out in 1953. And the sound effects designer had the rather unenviable task of being told by the director, whatever the Martians are using to wipe out humanity, I don't want it to sound like it came from this planet. How do you do that when every single thing you have at your disposal for sound effects comes from this planet? Well, in an absolute act of desperation, nothing was working. As he tells the story, he just left the studio that day, was walking down the street to a local hot dog vendor that he went to drown his sorrows with. And he just so happened to be walking past a radio broadcast antenna when the maintenance man was up on top. They had these long metal guide wires coming down to hold the structure up. And his hammer kept hitting one of those guide wires while he was working. The sound that came down that wire was the answer to his prayers. He went back, got a tape recorder and a wrench, as he says in the story, only thing he could find, started tapping on it and recording it. Well, that becomes the Martian's weapon. Now, for those people who did not see the movie in 1953, no problem. Just wait till 1966 rolls around. That sound designer went to work for a gentleman called Gene Roddenberry, Desilu Studios, for a television series called Star Trek. And he brought that sound effect with him because he owned the rights to it. So the noise that he heard back in 1953, discovered quite by accident, was this. There is no editing at all. It is just someone tapping on a metal wire and you're hearing the vibration moving up and down the length of that cable.
That's a
it.
phaser.
So it becomes the photon torpedo of the
Yeah,
Federation Starship Enterprise. It is the energy weapon used by the Martians. If you watch the Bewitched television series, they borrowed it. Anytime a spell does not work correctly, that's the cue to the audience that something went wrong. And in my case, we grew up with Saturday morning cartoons. Oh, it got mileage. It was every energy weapon out there, magic spells, teleporters, faster than light drive, anything they could come up with, that one sound represented all of it. And then by the early 90s, it starts to disappear because computer technology is making it easier to come up with artificial sounds and computers start to take over. Now, there is one other sound effect that Hollywood doesn't need, but they love it. They've got a lot of mileage out of it. And everyone has heard this sound. Every single one of you. You probably didn't realize it had a name. It's called the Wilhelm scream. And it comes from a very, very B Western, wherein Corporal Wilhelm gets hit in the leg with an arrow. And that actor just phoned that performance in. It became a joke in Hollywood, so much so that they try to sneak that sound into every single movie that is ever made. You'll find it in all the Star Wars movies. It's in Toy Story. Anytime you have a big crowd scene, watch for somebody to fall over. You'll hear that sound in the background. But the Wilhelm scream is this. So not bad for a movie that most people don't remember except for that one sound. At this point, we're going to head back outside and talk a little bit about the movie Tombstone.
All right.
Matching the cadence, the way he says things, and that hint of an accent that he would throw in for certain characters.
Yeah, you got
He
it.
didn't normally speak with, but when he's in character, he does kind of have just this way of speaking.
Right, yeah, definitely.
Is this the John Wayne effect?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was telling me he really got that spot on, that John Wayne.
Well, Brennan's easier. Just act like you don't have teeth.
Yeah. Okay. All I hear is people saying, "Hey, Pilgrim," you know, like that.
My little 8-year-old grandson
Yeah.
comes from a guy's family. He's dad, man's man. And at 8-year-old, we asked him, how did he know how to do climbing all this stuff? He goes, a man's got to do what
We
a
talk
man's
about
got
the
to
movie
do.
Tombstone being filmed here.
That's
We
fine.
mean it.
That's
But
good.
when they shot that film in 1992, as a movie lot, we existed in two different places. This is our main studio lot, 201 South Kinney Road. We also operated a satellite facility just outside of Benson, Arizona. That's called the Mescal Movie Ranch. We operated that from 1968 until it was sold off in 2020. So it's out of Mescal, the sets to represent Tombstone are located. What they shot here were different scenes that, because our buildings can be anything and anywhere, you don't have to go all over the place to shoot them. And we lost all of those locations, one notable exception. Peace out of here. We lovingly refer to that little monster as the mule. Yeah, that's a little easier to talk over now. So, what they're shooting here are different scenes because we can do anything and be anything. They don't have to go everywhere around the globe just to film what amounts to about 25 minutes worth of footage in a 2.5 hour long movie. But the one building that survived the fire just so happens to be the most recognized structure we have on the property. Right here at the end of the street, and that's the old Mission. It was built for the movie Arizona back in 1939, and at that time it wasn't much larger than the decorative scroll work around the door. And that's pretty much all that remains of it today. It's been built up quite a bit over the years. It was actually relocated from its original installation. It used to line up more with the peak of Golden Gate Peak, and in the later years it was moved over to where you see it now. But that is where they shot the opening scene of Tombstone.
Okay.
Right there in front of the church doors That's where Curly Bill Brocious and Johnny Ringo will gun down the groom, the best man, and the priest, introducing the Cochise County Cowboys to the audience. For John Wayne fans, yes, that is the church from El Dorado. It was slightly smaller in 1965. It didn't have the whitewash on it yet. It was more of a battleship gray color when you see it in that movie. And the bell towers, the tops of them were vastly different. But the left bell tower, that's where the bandits would have been firing down at Robert Mitchum and John Wayne, pinning them down behind some wagons down here on the street corner. Now the rest of the shots they did for the movie Tombstone, that would all be right over here on Front Street and Kansas Street. The first sequence they do after the use of the old mission, it's filmed right here in part. It's the scene that introduces Doc Holliday and Big Nose Kate to the audience. Now, the scene where he actually stabs Ed Bailey, that was filmed out at Mescal in one of their saloon sets. But they didn't want to show the street outside because that ends up being Tombstone, and Doc is supposed to be in Texas in that scene. They didn't want to confuse the audience, so they split his exit in 2 shots. Big Nose Kate goes out the door first. Doc starts to back towards the door. He doffs his hat to everybody, scrapes a little bit more money into his little handbag, closes it, and he starts to go out the door. They then leave Mescal and come out over here to Front Street and show him walking out an unrelated set of doors out onto the street here. He will then, along with Big Nose Kate, get onto their horse and start their long ride out to the Arizona Territory, which was 16 feet that way, hang a left, can't miss it. So down along this section of Kansas Street, right between where the bathhouse sign and the water tower is, that's where Kansas Street would come across, that sign. Down on this side of Kansas Street, they did 2 scenes. The first is the only time we portray the city of Tombstone here, and it's for the I'm Your Huckleberry scene. There's some that claim that was actually filmed out at Mescal, but we know they filmed it here because when Johnny Ringo goes off on his I want your blood, I want your souls little tirade, Sam Elliott in the role of Virgil Earp will turn around to confront him, and when he does, look over his shoulder. He's getting photobombed by Golden Gate Pete over here. They recycled Kansas Street to represent Denver, Colorado for the last scene of the movie. Now there's a very good reason why that thing takes place at night. That's to hide the fact you've already seen that street once before in the movie. The entire length of Kansas Street is completely blacked out. They just have a few token lamps in the background to indicate that it's nighttime. And the only buildings that they have lit up are the structures you haven't seen yet. And that would have been on the Front Street side here, right at the intersection. So right about where the water tower is today, that's where Wyatt and Josephine will end up dancing in the snow at the end of the movie. And that's supposed to be Denver in the dead of winter. It's being filmed in the Arizona desert in the middle of July. It was 103 degrees that day, and there wasn't much in the way of snow to be found. So the snow you see them dancing in, like everything else in a movie lot, it was genuine fake. It was made out of shaved white plastic. It looked great on camera, but there was one small problem with it. It was a type of material better suited for the use in controlled environments like sound stages or theater productions. If you use it outside, you're at the mercy of the elements. And there are 2 things that never happen here at Old Tucson. The wind never blows, and it never rains. Unless you're here in July. That's the beginning of monsoon season. Well, when they're filming that scene over here, we were ringed by thunderstorms. They'd been building up progressively all that afternoon. And they were kind of sweating bullets, but they were able to get all the footage they needed for that night shoot without the storms posing any problems. But when they were done filming that night, the cast was let go for the day, the crew was tearing down and getting ready for the next day's shoot, and those thunderstorms finally decided to pay Old Tucson a visit. They came over in a steady conga line of angry clouds, generating wind gusts between 60 to 70 miles an hour. Wow. It picked up that fake white snow and launched it down the south side of the property.
Oh boy.
That scene was filmed 33 years ago. We are still cleaning up after it. All these years later, we are still finding bits and pieces of that fake white plastic snow tucked into the nooks and crannies of the buildings on the parts of the property that survived the fire in '95. Proof that there are some things that come out of Hollywood that last forever. The last sequence they filmed made use of our train station. That would have been at the end of the street, just to the right of the little white church down there. The little white church is often mistaken for the one you see in Little House. That was actually much farther up on Kansas Street, and sadly that was lost to the fire. That structure went up in 2002 for a film called Ghost Rock. Anyone seen that one?
No.
You're welcome. I just saved you 2.5 hours of your life to spend on something else. It is not the greatest movie to come out of this lot. So it's kind of like Mission Impossible. We disavow all knowledge of that project. But just to the right of where the church stands today, that's where the train station set would have been located. That's where Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan are introduced to the audience at the beginning of the film, and it's also where Frank Stillwell gets shotgunned by Wyatt later on. And after he's killed Stillwell, he turns around and tells a very terrified Ike Clanton the line that ends up as the period of the sentence of every single teaser trailer for that project. You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me. Now at this point, we're going to head back to the south end of the lot. We have an appointment with the only real thing at Old Tucson.
The mission structure looks something like in a Jackie Chan, Owen Wilson movie. Would that have been used?
That one would not be one of ours, but that particular design is all over the place.
Like the Alamo.
Yeah, the Alamo. The Alamo was built about the same time period as the rest of the architecture that set designers are looking at in San Diego and Los Angeles. So it's Spanish colonial, about 1770. So they were using pretty much that style, and they plastered it on Old West sets all over the place.
Walking down the main street.
So I'm curious now, with your knowledge of all these films and the accuracy, would movie companies come to you and say, hire you to help them get it somewhat accurate?
They wouldn't come directly to us. They would usually have already hired one during development.
You know,
So they'll be working with historians, usually collegiate historians, when they're actually writing it. By the time they're getting to filming, they've already pretty much hammered it. But they'll, if they have any questions, they might have a historian on the site going, what they would have done, or, oh yeah, they would have done it like this. It would, here's a couple of variations. Most of the time, we're just kind of in the background trying not to do the nerd voice a lot of the time. But to its credit, Hollywood's a lot better than it used to be. Their accuracy, because sometimes you just kind of have to flub things a little bit for storytelling. But they're in the high 90s at this point when they're portraying this time period. Sometimes there are things you just can't get anymore that they have to substitute. Other times it's just a more practical concession. My biggest pet peeve, I love the Horizons thing that Kevin Costner's been working on. The costumes are right, everything there, it's 1869. Everything they have is percussion, or it's very early metallic cartridge. The only lever action you see them using is a Model 62 Henry rifle. I'm like, yes! And then you get to this one scene where they're going up against the bad guys, and they whip out this just absolutely gorgeous Walker revolver, a 47 Walker, and they're putting metallic cartridges in it because it's a cartridge conversion firearm. I'm like, oh, thank you for playing. That's not going to happen for 20 more years. Now, when I talk about the oldest real thing on the property, what I'm talking about is this little building right here. Our little Southern Pacific structure predates the movie sets here by 39 years. It's 126 years old at this point.
Wow.
And it was actually out in Elgin, Arizona, on the branch line. It's owned by the Southern Pacific, where they shot the original 310 to Yuma. This is the yard master's office. It would have been way at the far end of the rail yard they were using for those scenes, so it never was in the film. But when they were done shooting, the SP scrapped out that branch line. But they offered to send the actual train station here to Old Tucson. We didn't have one yet. We were thrilled. Yeah, that's great. A little bit of movie history. And the problem with that was that when we started taking a really good look at that structure with the SP, we discovered that building was being held together by surface tension and wishful thinking. It would never have survived being transported here to Old Tucson. This building, which was farther down the rail yard, it had been gone through in more recent time, and it was in much better shape. It ends up being set in its place, and it ends up serving as the train station for our little railroad that goes around the park here. This is where, when the theme park elements first opened, this is where you would board it. We have a new train station over here, and at that point, this went back to being a movie set. One of the things I love about it, take a look at the windows in this thing. You see a little bit of a ripple in all the glass panes. That shows you when this thing was built. That is what's called ripple glass, and how they made windows in the Victorian era and all the way back to when glass was the first thing. The only non-stick surface they could get for the glass to form on was mercury. Any imperfections in the mercury surface would show up in the glass pane through the windows and whatnot. And so if you want to know how old a building is, look at the windows. If the glass has a ripple to it, that building was built sometime before 1915. If it's flat glass, it's more modern, and they don't use the mercury tables anymore, and so the glass is a flat, uniform texture at this point.
And a fun fact on windows too, those old windows like that at a house I lived in 1855, they get thicker at the bottom through the years.
They do, yeah.
Because the glass is a liquid and
yeah,
it slowly...
glass is not solid. Yeah, it's actually still, it's a silicate, it's still considered a liquid. It's just very, very slow flowing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you look at buildings, yeah, the really, and you'll see it in Europe, the glass is actually parted from the top.
Yeah.
Because it's slowly melting through the panes. It's really thick at the bottom. And the other one you'll have is the leftovers when they were done pouring. You get a little bloop. Well, I'm not going to waste that. You get this little bullseye in the glass. So if you see a glass pane with a little weird little bullseye in it, that was the end of the pour on that glass pane. As is the case with all good things, they do eventually come to an end, and such the case with our visit with the sets today. On behalf of the entire staff and crew of all Tucson, we'd like to thank you for spending some time with us. And in the words of many a director in the 500 projects that call this place home over the years, that's a wrap, folks. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Very good. Excellent.
This way. That's the challenge of my day. If I don't hang him on the hook right inside the door, I'm guaranteed to get my steps in just looking for him.
Right. There you are. And maybe you give me a little John Wayne.
Sure. Quick question for you though.
Yeah.
When you do your radio, do you do voice broadcast or do you do?
No, this is you said code.
Yeah, do you do?
I do both.
You do both. Okay.
Yeah.
You ever notice that in all the movies they're either tapping gibberish
Yeah.
or they're
Yeah.
using the international Morse code that
Right.
didn't exist?
Yeah, the old railroad code. It's just
Yeah.
a clicks. Yeah, click,
Yeah.
click, click. Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Are you a
that's-
hammer operator?
I haven't, but yeah, my grandfather was a telegrapher for the
Okay.
SP.
Neat.
So yeah, we were. You'll appreciate this one. We were. I don't know if they still do it, but we were. I was probably 10, and we were in San Francisco, and we're waiting to cross Powell Street, and the cable car is coming down, and it's doing a little bell thing, and my grandfather starts just laughing. He's like, "What's so funny?" He goes, he's swearing at him in Morse code.
Oh, really?
He said, "What's he saying?" He says, "Get the hell out of my way." So he said he's
really?
clanging that all the way down the hill in Morse code.
Yeah, very few people would know that. Okay, very
So,
good.
John Wayneism. A movie line or just? Okay, let's see. Well, howdy, Pilgrim. You're watching WG7D Radio on YouTube.
Very good. Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Well, that was super interesting. And I'll put that video up in 4K for all the detail there. But now I got to head for Texas. Here's your last view of the Arizona mountains here. And I got to get in and drive for about 300 and some miles. Here we go.